Our next speaker is our company's leader and a true icon in the cybersecurity world. And because battling security here on Earth is obviously not enough of a challenge for this guy, Eugene will be one of the first adventurous few who will be part of Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic voyage into space. So he can do his initial recon on that emerging market. Please put your hands together for Kaspersky Labs' very own Chairman and CEO, Eugene Kaspersky.
Okay, thank you so much, and very good morning, everyone. Still good morning. Honestly speaking, my ticket number is 275, so I still have years to wait for the space journey. But I hope one day I'll do it. I was in many different parts of the world, well, everywhere, including the South Pole, everywhere. So the space is still like, oh, okay, that could be the interesting journey. I'm pretty sure that their space systems, they are very well protected and they are safe by design. Or maybe not. I will check it. Okay. What's the definition of the successful business? Successful business is when investors are happy, management is happy, customers are happy, the production is growing, the customer base is growing as well, so that's exactly definition of the cybercrime. The production grows like hell. In 2014, in our collection of the malicious files, so malicious applications, we had just about 500,000 files. Now we have more than 300 million. I don't have a calculator to count the persons. So, I guess if the national GDP grows with the same speed, we could have the conference on the moon. Yes. Unfortunately, this business grows very fast. And actually, the number of customers is growing fast as well. Last year, I had the same data, but from the 2014, and last year I said that more than half of our customers, they were really protected by us because we stopped attacks. We stopped malicious attack just before it infected the computer system or the smartphone. And that was more than half, more than 50%. Last year, more than 60%. So unfortunately, the customer database is growing. A successful business needs to have happy customers. Well, that's exception. Because these customers are not happy because they don't want to be customers. But they are never asked. At the same time, the business is very risky because there are more and more successful investigations and there are more and more hundreds of criminals arrested everywhere around the world. But at the same time, it's a kind of evolution. And the stupid are arrested. The silly guys, the juniors, most of them, they're arrested. But the more professional, very smart, they're getting more and more smart and clever. And unfortunately, now we are facing the cybercrime, which is as professional as a state-sponsored attacks. And that was a very good example of the Carbon which was investigated last year. There were arrests. Unfortunately, not all of them were arrested. So they are street criminals, the drops. Many were arrested, but the leaders, unfortunately, not all of them. And this is just an indicator of the complexity of the new cyber criminal attacks. In the past, I was talking about the state-sponsored attacks on this level and the criminal attacks like in the middle, not anymore. The complexity of new cyber criminal attacks is the same as the state-sponsored attacks. And it means that they have access to the new technologies or they invent new technologies. They have more or less the same resources and they are very motivated. So to analyze and investigate attacks like a Carbon or the attacks which were recently disclosed, we were publishing the information during the Security Analyst Summit in Tenerife. The complexity of these attacks is very close, even more complicated than many of the state-sponsored attacks. Like Equation, which is maybe done somewhere at the East Coast. The Carbonak is speaking Russian, and that was quite an international gang. So unfortunately, the reality is the cybercrime is getting more and more and more smart and professional. At the same time, it's getting more and more international. When I said that Carbonak was a Russian-speaking attack, I don't mean that it was only Russia there. There were criminals from many nations, from Russia, from Ukraine, from Europe, but they were speaking Russian. There are many nations there, unfortunately, criminals from many nations, they are communicating, and they share technologies, and they attack the victims in many different countries. In some cases, it's even very unusual. For example, we were observing the Russian-speaking gang and the Chinese-speaking gang. And then one day we found the attack which used components from both technologies, from both sides. Well, but Russians, they don't speak Chinese. Chinese, they don't speak English, they don't speak Russian. So that could be someone in between to communicate them. Or maybe the new leader to manage both Russian-speaking and Chinese-speaking criminals. So unfortunately, their cyber gangs, they're getting more and more and more international. At the same time, many of them, they provide services. So they have business partners. They trade their malware, they develop malware by requests, they share their stolen data, and some of them, they even have the websites, so they have a technical support, they have the news. There were a couple of cases then the criminals, they had partner conferences in the past. Actually, that gang was arrested. But it's very funny, on the website, on the criminals' website, there are pictures, reports from the conference, and they had a lottery with a Hummer car. Unfortunately, we don't have such a lottery here. So the reality is they're getting more and more sophisticated, they're getting more smart, and at the same time getting more international, and they are available. Mercenaries ready to do any kind of job for money. Next, the bad news is that not only cybercrime is getting more smart, also the traditional crime, traditional mafia, they recognized power of cyber. I don't mean that they join the cybercrime. It doesn't mean that they attack banks or online payment systems. They attack transportation, they attack production lines to support traditional crime. For example, and I was talking about that last year, attack on a coal mine in Russia when the criminals hacked the system and they were reporting more coal, which actually were loaded to trains. So they had a stolen coal, and they had a company which was trading stolen coal. Europol last year reported attack on the Antwerp seaport. Latin American drug cartels, they transport cocaine in the United States and in Europe, and they use sea containers, but at the end, at the destination port, they need to take cocaine out of the containers, so they employed a hacker. Hackers are available. I employed a hacker to hack the Antwerp seaport SCADA system, the transportation line, and they were unloading containers with cocaine, they knew containers with cocaine, to the place they had access to. The recent story about the sea pirates. Actually, of course, you know, there's many stories about the ships which were hijacked, and they have the ransom to release the ship and the crew. They changed the strategy. They have access to the databases of the containers, and they hijack the ship, and they knew the containers with the most expensive stuff. They open these containers, they take the stuff out of there and gone. No ransom. But it's cyber. The recent story about how they steal petrol, the gas. So the volume of the petrol depends on the temperature. And then the tanks are filled with the petrol, The volume depends on the temperature, so they hack the system, they decrease the temperature, so actually they have more petrol in the tank, and at destination, the temperature is correct, so they take on the amount of their petrol out of tanks, which is what they need, and at the end of the day, there is a rest. So the traditional gangs, not cyber gangs, they employ hackers which are available to do the traditional crime. I'm afraid in the future we will see more and more such stories because it's obvious, the cyber systems are everywhere. But this is not the worst. I'm afraid that in a very near future, and some officials from the United States and from other nations, they are expecting that to happen very soon, that we will have their cyber terrorist, cyber sabotage attacks. And just a few days ago, finally we got the data about blackout attack in Ukraine. In December last year, there were blackout in a few regions in Ukraine. So the hackers, they had access to the SCADA systems, which managing the power grid, and they just turned it off. Then they wiped the firmware and they wiped the computer systems. So the engineers at the power grid, they had physically go to the stations and physically turn them on. What's the difference with the United States? As far as I know, in the United States, you can manually switch it on. So if the same happens in the United States, you have to reinstall all the computer systems, to rewrite the firmware on the hardware components, and only after that to switch the power on. It will take much more time. That's the bad news. The good news is that officials and the industries, they do understand the problem. They do understand that it can happen. Actually, if you have time, when you have time, please browse the internet for this story about Ukrainian attack. It's very interesting, complicated. Actually, their systems, they infected long time ago. And it seems, well, I don't have proofs, but it smells like the systems, they were infected with a Russian-speaking, most probably state-sponsored malware. Unfortunately, the power companies in Ukraine, they are not our customers. So the state not recognized for a long time. And then there was a different different gang of criminals which used different technologies and much more simple malware. Because we can see that if it's made by the same gang, we see that the applications are brothers, they are relative. In this case, they were absolutely different malware. And it seems that their first actors, they gave access to another team to attack the Ukrainian power grid. More questions? Well, it's not clear. Still, the question is, they could make a damage, physical damage, not just they shut down the power. They could physically damage their grid. They didn't do it. So it was kind of the message, and which I don't know which kind of message, because there are nothing left there. So they just switch it off and disappear. Okay, I'm expecting more news about this story, but this is very last example, and unfortunately, it can happen everywhere. All the systems, they are cyber, except New York Underground. Do you know that New York Underground is still electric? They press buttons, they have a mechanical stuff to change the railways, they communicate with the drivers by radio. Nobody told them that we are living after the cyber industrial revolution. They still use technologies which were made, like New York Underground is more than 100 years old, correct? So they still use the same stuff. Well, maybe they, of course, they replace the components, but the logic is still the same. But unfortunately, cyber systems are everywhere, from the planes, cars, power plants, transportation. This hotel power grid, you press the button somewhere and you can manage the power grids here in the hotel. I'm absolutely sure it's true. And unfortunately, the systems, they are vulnerable. They're unsafe, all that. The operating systems, the software, which is the applications which manage all that, and the embedded system, the industrial SCADA systems, based on the different operating systems which are vulnerable, and applications are vulnerable. In many cases, they're connected to the internet. In many cases, they can't change that because they are modern systems like a turbine. They report telemetrics to the vendor for safety, and they must be connected. Like the planes and cars, they're all the time connected. The modern cars, they all the time report telemetrics to the service stations. So unfortunately, we are living in the age of the dark age of security, when the whole world is vulnerable. And you don't need to be the super hacker to attack some particular systems. In some cases, it's just an IP address, and there's a kind of turbine behind the IP address, and it's vulnerable, and vulnerabilities are known. So actually, to attack the system, you need to be just a hacker, and you need to have a guy from the industry to understand how to manage, to know how to manage the system, and maybe to disrupt it, to physically damage that. Unfortunately, that's possible. And unfortunately, all the operating systems are vulnerable. All the public available operating systems. Still, Microsoft Windows is the leader, of course, but Android is catching. Mac OS, well, it's not so much in the industrial environment, but it does exist. There's a good question, why there are so few attacks on Mac? Well, I don't know, because I don't manage cybercrime, I don't manage the bad guys. But I guess that there are not many Mac engineers are available. We, as a software company, we know that it's very hard to find Mac engineer. In some cases, we even take the Linux engineers and we teach them how to develop software for Mac. I guess cybercrime, they are facing the same problem. Not many Mac engineers. Linux, iOS, also, well, iOS is a secure operating system by design. All the applications, they are signed with cryptographic signature. It's almost not possible to inject, almost not possible. But from time to time, there are vulnerabilities in the operating system in the applications, and from time to time, we see attacks on the iOS as well. One of example is the Dalai Lama office, Apple customer, so they use Macs and iOS, but from time to time they're victims of the very bad attacks, which are, of course, Chinese speaking. So, the next question is, why do we live in a dark age? I even call it the cyber middle age, when we have a new technologies, but it's unsafe, it's dangerous, but we can get, we can get back. Can we get back to the pre-computer era? I'm afraid not. Because the computer systems, they change the world. It's not only the communication, it's also the enabling the business and managing the industrial processes, the production lines, which was not possible to do before the computer technologies. So we're living in a dark age, and I explained that as a cycle of innovation. It's sorry. It's not only about the computer technologies, the internet. It's about every innovation. First of all, there is an invention. Some great person invents a wheel some 100,000 years ago. And second stage is we enjoy that. We have benefits from that. We like it. It changed our life. Third, well, it's dangerous. It works, but from time to time, there are security problems. Number 4, we have to improve it. We have to make it more safe, secure by design. It takes time. So I call it circle of innovation. Invention, benefits, problems, improvement. And that's about everything. about the wheel, about the fire, about the power, about the cars, about the space, and about cyber. So in the cyber, we are now on the third stage. So now the task is how to improve cyber systems to make them safe, immune by design. That's complicated. And that was the most easy way how to explain how much of work we have to do. I split all their cyber systems in 9 categories. Important, which are home users, small businesses, small enterprises. Critical, which have thousands, hundred thousands of customers, of users, which could be affected, and the national security, when the national security, national economy depends on the cyber system. And that's physical infrastructure, telecommunications, and data. So there are 9 areas we have to pay attention to. So the physical devices could be the home, coffee machines, vacuum cleaners, then the connected cars, individual connected cars, and then coming to the power grid, power grid, power plants, transportation, etc., etc. Actually, there is still no clear definition about what's a national security, what's a critical. I know only one country recently, finally they published their definition of critical infrastructure, the Germany. Germany said the critical infrastructure is power, transportation, water supply, and telecommunication, which provide service for more than 500,000 people. So below, they said a city with 100,000 citizens, it's not critical infrastructure. If it's more than 500,000 people as a customers of this service, that's critical infrastructure. Well, the good question is, if they have the resort and the high seasons and low seasons. And the high season, we have more than 500,000 people there, and the low season, less than 500,000 people. So in the summer, that could be critical infrastructure. In the winter, is not a critical infrastructure. Still, there are many questions. Still, this is not really clear. But the good news is that the governments, they're moving in the right direction. And I believe that security for the critical infrastructure, for the national systems, it must be regulated by governments. So, what we need to do to protect all the systems? If I were a god to create this world from the scratch, I will do cyber much more secure, immune by design. Cyber systems which are based on the top of their secure platform, which guarantees that it's unhackable, not like Microsoft Windows or Mac or Linux or any other system. Second, the applications are safe and unhackable by design, and all the hardware, the firmware, is also based on the top of secure platform. Is it possible to do if you are not a god? Complicated. So, can we expect the golden age soon? That depends. Actually, I think that for the consumer devices, consumer software, it's not possible. Because if we invest more in the security by design in a consumer environment, it means that the vendors, the companies, they have to spend more resources, more time to deliver the new product, which is secure by design, to the market. It means they will lose competition to the companies which don't invest into security enough. So, to be honest, I don't believe in a future of the consumer devices which are secure by design in a, foreseeable time. Not soon. Maybe later. Maybe 100 to 300 years from now, we will have it. But not in the next decade. Forget about that. Too expensive and late to the market. But if you're talking about critical infrastructure, critical data, I think that's time to change it. And actually we have a plan, we know what to do, and we have the first customers which are using these ideas and these systems how to protect the critical data and the physical infrastructure. First of all, of course, it starts with the security audit penetration test, analyze your network to make their plan of your processes, business processes, and recognize the most critical parts in there and protect them. Change the design of the network, cut unnecessary links, etc., etc. A lot of work, but it's necessary to do. And the technology which provides a much higher security for the traditional operating system, for the traditional office environment or industrial environment, it's a default deny. The trusted applications, which are in the list, and there are no other applications allowed to be executed in this system. It's more complicated to manage, more expensive, because you have to have more engineers, IT staff, to support their trusted application lists. But it works, it guarantees much higher security. Unfortunately, of course, it's not 100% security, but it's close, more close to the perfect security. And the perfect security is, do you know the definition of perfect security? When the attack costs more than possible damage. Correct? So, these systems, they guarantee the security which is more close to the perfect security. It's much more expensive to hack the system which is, after security audit, necessary changes, optimization of network, and which use default deny system. Much more expensive. So most probably the attackers will check it and say, okay, we have another customer. And we'll go to another victim. But for their physical infrastructure, I'm afraid it's not enough. Well, is it possible to redesign the critical infrastructure based on the top of secure unhackable platform? Yes, it's possible. But unfortunately, there are no nation in this world which have enough of engineers. There are nations which have enough of money, but not enough of engineers. And I've heard talks in the United States about, okay, so we will import engineers. Welcome, but okay, so if it's about critical infrastructure, only American citizens will be allowed to do that. Correct? So there is no enough of people. So my idea is redesign a little bit the existing systems, and at the same time, the new systems must be developed on the top of secure platforms. So in 10, 20, 30 years from now, we will have the critical infrastructure, the physical infrastructure, based on the top of secure platforms. So, how to develop their systems on the top of secure operating system? It's a different story, and I'm very proud to say that we have the very first customer for that. It's an oil refinery in Russia. So they designed their security system based on our secure OS. Actually, they didn't change SCADA. We don't want to change it right now. We introduced traffic monitoring systems. So there is a traditional Microsoft Windows SCADA. There is a physical infrastructure, and there are controllers in between which transport the digital data. They convert it to electric signals and back. So we put the filter there, and we have the trusted scenarios. For example, there is an oil refinery, so the pressure must be like this, the rotation speed of little turbines like this, and so we have a list of the trusted scenarios. If the systems gets out of the trusted scenarios, we send a red whistle to the security guys. So we have the very first installation, and they are happy. Because, well, there are no sabotage attacks, but they reported that they are catching the engineers which are working in a little bit optimized way, not according to the plans, not according to the what they can do to allow actions. They work like they like to do. and the system recognize this wrong behavior of their own engineers. It means that we can stop attacks in a yellow zone. So we will definitely stop it in a red zone. So the world is vulnerable. It's a dark age of the cybersecurity, but we are ready to provide a very high level of security to individuals with our existing products and services, to the enterprises, and to the critical infrastructure for all different parts of the physical, critical data, and telecommunication. So, I am working for 27 years in cybersecurity, so I'm a little bit paranoid, so all the time I'm talking about the scariest scenarios, because, well, paranoia is a professional disease of security people. But at the same time, I'm optimistic. We will survive. But to survive, we need to help each other. Thank you very, very, very much.
Eugene, fantastic as always.
Are you scared?
Oh, I thought I was going to be feeling a little safer.
Not really, because he's working in the company for many years. He's paranoid as well. They're paranoid, they're never scared, because that's in the heart.
So you will be staying with us for the rest of the conference?
Yeah, sure.
Fantastic. Yes. May I ask a question? Would you be kind enough to help us give out the awards this evening at our awards dinner?
Definitely, yes.
Fantastic.
And of course, I have the pleasure to give the awards for the best of our partners. And actually, once again, it's not only the award ceremony, not only for fun. I'm expecting to have meetings and to talks to all of you, how to understand how we need to improve, what can we do to improve our sales, our business in North America. So, welcome.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Eugene Kaspersky.